Thank you. I'm Heisenberg, and I appreciate the opportunity to come talk to you guys about this. I'll talk a little bit more about my background. Come on in, guys, and there's plenty of seats up front, and I promise not to splash or anything. Let's get all of the formalities out of the way first. Yes, this is a kilt. Yes, this is a Scottish Highland kilt. This is the Buchanan hunting modern tartan. And it's legit because my ancestors are septs of the Clan Buchanan. And so that's why when I go to cons, I always wear and this is from USA Kilts. If you want a good kilt, USA Kilts is your choice. So what I want to do, I've got a lot of really strong feelings about penetration testing. Penetration testing as a profession, penetration testing as something that you do both as the focus of your career, but also, as it turns out, a lot of the techniques of penetration testing, even if you're not a hardcore pen tester, a lot of these techniques are going to be very, very useful for you if you are in any aspect of cybersecurity. And even if you're a manager of folks that are doing penetration testing, you need to understand some of these details. So let's talk about what it is that you're thinking about as a penetration tester. And I'll talk about this a little bit more, but this is kind of a funny cartoon, right? You know, it's like my friends think that I'm tearing the world down, right? And society thinks that I'm evil. I've had people, when I've said I'm a white hat hacker, they've said there's no such thing. I'm like, you, my friend, are missing out, right? And then of course, like I said, do what the boss thinks I do, and then what I think I do and what I actually do. So let's talk for I've got about 45 minutes, which is, and there's no extra charge for this information. It comes out to about 85.5 microyears. So there's no extra charge for this, but a microyear is 31.5 seconds. So there's a number you can use. And you can say, if there's only one thing I got out of the talk, it's that a microyear is about 31.5 seconds. So I'll talk to you guys in a couple of microyears about this. But let's talk about why this talk. I've been in the pen testing business for a while. You'll see that in my bio a little bit. But what I really want to focus on is do you have the aptitude? Do you have the right mindset to be a penetration tester? Do you have the attitude? And especially, I'm going to focus on ethics and teamwork. And then finally, you see at the bottom of the slide, and this is on purpose, bottom of the slide is talking about ability. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. And this Venn diagram over here is kind of a little bit of just sort of random thinking kinds of things. But really, your attitude, ethics, conduct ties in with becoming a motivated learner along with your aptitude, the mindset. Are you a hard worker? Are you practiced? Are you skilled? Are you curious? And what kind of learning and knowledge that you can pick up. And then all of that puts together into this Venn diagram of could you become a professional pen tester or could you effectively apply these techniques? I'll talk a little bit about that first gig and hopefully get some questions and answers. All right, so a little bit more about me. I am a geek, scientist, hacker kind of a thing. I spent the first 30 years of my career at Los Alamos National Laboratory doing gamma ray spectroscopy. As it turns out, gamma ray spectroscopy is a gateway drug to becoming a white hat hacker. I did not know that, right? But I make that point jokingly. But the truth of the matter is that most of the pen testers that I've seen that are really effective, I'm not even talking necessarily good, I'm talking about effective, have come from all kinds of a diverse background. So if you're sitting in the audience and you think to yourself, I don't have a cybersecurity degree, I don't have a computer science degree, I don't have. Some weird geek that did gamma ray spectroscopy became a hacker. And so you can do it too, even if your background is something totally non-technical. I've hired totally non-technical penetration testers, and one ex-Proforce guy turned out to be a brilliant penetration tester. So no matter what your background, I want to encourage you in this. And as you guys know, I'm a private pilot. You saw me boring the tears out of you. I also fly gliders, by the way. It's something about old airplanes I like. And currently I'm a cybersecurity program manager for strategic management solutions. So this talk, I've lived this talk from the beginning, okay? I have known a lot of pen testers. I have worked with a lot of pen testers. I have hired a lot of pen testers. I have hired the awesome and I have hired the disaster. And I can tell you that part of the reason why this talk is to say, if you're going to become a pen tester, I'd like to help you not become a walking disaster, okay? So if you can pick up some of these techniques and things like that, and some of the things that I'm sharing with you, it will help you to become more effective at your job and to get better job satisfaction, to do a good job, be a good member of a team. The other thing is that, and this I have a real strong passion for, I had to swim upstream when I became a pen tester. There was a lot of gatekeeping in this community, and nothing pisses me off faster than to have somebody gatekeep. If you've got somebody that thinks that they're so elite and they start discouraging you and looking down on you, I would like to share my heart with them, and it won't be pretty, because it torques me off to see people gatekeep. So if you're already an established pen tester, you're probably not in this talk, but if you see somebody who's gatekeeping, if you feel like somebody's gatekeeping against you, fight it, keep pushing, keep persisting. It took me a long time to do that, but I did. If you're already in the community, I inspire and implore you, give somebody a fair shot, okay? And this is my famous quote about pen testing. I can teach anybody in this room how to pen test, but if you're an adult, I can't teach you how to not be an asshole, okay? So I'm gonna focus more on how to not be a jerk than a lot of the technical skills, but I gotta pick the technical skills up. Okay, what kind of person makes a good pen tester? What do you notice is not up in that word cloud? There's a lot of things that are deliberately not up in that word cloud. Gender, background, socioeconomical status, age. I was in my 50s when I started doing pen testing. There was a bit of a bias against somebody being that old. You are never too old, never too young, never too whatever to be excluded from this, okay? So I really want to encourage you to do that. If you've got any of these characteristics, even a few of these, if you're curious, if you can learn, if you're patient, if you're persistent, if you can focus on details, if you're interested in if you got this questioning attitude, like if you see an error, so the computer goes and gives you an error, and you sit there and you think, I wonder why it did that. And you try and reproduce the error, and you think, if I do it this way and I face left and I hold my tongue just right, the computer gives me a blue screen. Okay, now you're starting to think about it, right? Because you've got that curiosity. What happened? Why is it doing it this way? Okay, let's talk about the first aspect of this, and that is aptitude. Do you have the aptitude to do this? And let's start right away with motivations. What is your motivation for wanting to become a pen tester? And I'm not going to put any judgment on any of these until we get down to the wrong reasons. But I can tell you that primarily the most effective pen testers that I've worked with, and many of them, like if you get Mike Manrod's in the crowd here, you get some of the work that they're doing. They are doing this thing because they have a passion to make us more secure. They are strengthening our defenses. If you get an opportunity to go to his talk, his and Ezra's talk, they're doing brilliant work, and it's organized at helping us stay more secure. If you've got a passion to say, I want to make the world more secure, that's it. If you have a passion to protect the vulnerable, that's one of the things that you want to do, right? And it's not just people vulnerable, it's companies that are vulnerable. And a lot of the folks just don't know. They don't know how exposed they are. If you've got a passion to be able to go in there and do that, that is one of the things that's going to qualify you as having the right aptitude for penetration testing. The wrong reasons, if you're doing it for revenge, if you're doing it to get back at somebody, if you're doing it for the lulz, if you get a kick out of disrupting, I would like to invite you to pursue a profession as a lawyer. Please don't become a penetration tester. Sorry to all the lawyers. All right, Let's take a minute and talk about the decay scheme of cesium-137. Now, everybody knows that it's got a 661 kilovolt gamma ray, but surprisingly, that comes from the barium ice. Oh, I'm sorry, wrong talk. Okay, all right. If you ask questions about that slide, I can go back to it. Remember, gamma ray spectroscopy, that's where I started. I can't get away from it. Let's talk about attitude, okay? And I'm gonna dwell on this slide for a few minutes. Ethics and integrity in this profession is critical. And I'll tell you a couple of stories. Can you be in a position of trust? If you are a penetration tester, you will at some point have access to a significant amount of sensitive information. You can have access to a bunch of personal information. You can do great harm with the things that you get. Can I trust you with that? That is a question you have to ask yourself. And as you start down this journey, you have to set that mindset right away, because it is such a slippery slope. You can't come back on the ethics track very well. If you start getting tempted to bend the rules just this once, it's very, very slippery to come back. I have known and worked with both types of people. I have known people that have been on penetration testing. They have come across, like for instance, we've compromised this individual's machine on a penetration test, and we were sitting there looking at his machine. Now, I focused on the federal government, so I didn't encounter a lot of things that a lot of people have encountered. A lot of people have encountered some stuff that's just blatantly illegal and fundamentally immoral, okay? When you're presented with that, what are you going to do? What do your rules of engagement say that you need to do if you find something that's classified on a network that's not classified? What do you do? And do you have the ethics and the moral character to be able to say, excuse me, Mr. Trusted Agent, we need to speak for a few minutes. Here's something that I've discovered. This is a real problem in terms of your conduct of standards in your organization, and I need to bring it to your attention. But if you come across somebody's American Express card, all of their information, are you tempted for even a micro moment to copy that down? If you come across their web browser and you've come across and you have compromised their credentials and you're looking in their web browser cache and you have access to their Fidelity account, what are you going to do? And this is where you really have to start that ethics line and say, I did not see that. I'm closing that. I'm closing that page. And one of the things that we developed, and this is something that I really developed in my team, is there is a point at which you need go no further. So if you have found one compromised document, you do not need to go through that share and find every other bloody compromised document. You do not need to do that. Point made, report to the trusted agent, deal with it, and move on with the penetration test. This is really, really critical because, as I said, I've worked with people that I would not trust to give them a used Kleenex. I have worked with people as penetration testers that I would fundamentally trust with my life. Be one of those people that you can absolutely be beyond any kind of a question. It even extends sometimes simply. I was on a penetration test just a couple, maybe 3 weeks ago, and the organization that we had gave us very tightly defined window of when we could test. Now, if I did a little bit of Nmap enumeration outside of that time window, is that going to be a problem? Yeah, they probably never notice, right? And I can kind of get this done, and I can get the project done, and I can move on. No, stop. This is what I'm talking about that slide. The agreement was between this hour and this hour on these days. Hard stop. You have to develop that practice right away. Teamwork. This is another one that I'm going to hammer on a little bit. Remember the goal of why we're doing this. The goal of why we're doing this is not so that you can look to be the badass, leadest person in the room. This is not about your personal aggrandizement. This is not about your personal glory. Fine, that first time you get a interpreter shell back, you can sit there and go, yes, yes, I got this, because that's what you've been working to for all these years, right? So you can take pride in that. But remember, Every shell that you get on an organization's network is somebody else's bad day, okay? And so this teamwork thing goes both ways. Be a good team member, but then hold each other accountable. I have been on penetration tests when we have penetrated a network, shells are literally raining down faster than we can connect to them, and the team started celebrating, and it pissed me off. Because this is not a time to celebrate. This is a time to think, oh boy, okay, good day for us. Bad day for the person sitting on the other side of the table who realized that we just compromised their whole entire environment and they're now scared for their job. So I want to really hammer that home. Your success is celebration inside, but this is not celebration outside, because remember why you're doing this. And you can tell I feel passionate about this. Remember why you're doing this. It's to teach them how to be better. That's why you're doing this. Now, talk about the teamwork the other way. So when I became the deputy program manager for our team, I changed that culture. It's like, guys, when we're having a beer in the afternoon, when we're in the car heading home, or we're having a beer in the evening, we can celebrate. That's fine. We will not do it at the customer site, full stop, because I will put an end to that. But by the same token, nobody here is as smart as everybody is together. The most effective you can be, and this is why I want to really hammer on the teamwork part of things, the most effective you can be is when you're feeding off each other. So this one time on a pen test, so me and another guy are sitting down right next to each other, and we're tick, 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 and he looks and he says, and slides his laptop over. What do you think of that? I don't know. Well, what about this, this, and this? Oh, that's a good idea. And I'm sitting there doing the same thing with him, and I said, wait a minute, you know what? From what I just saw you do, I'm wondering if I can do this. And so we started working, and pretty soon we're kind of looking over, and he's reaching over. And, it was almost like one of those funny movies, right? Where I'm reaching over on his keyboard, and he's, it's just like, and we were working together, and we built off one idea after another, and ultimately ended up leading to a finding of great significance. Did we get domain? No. But what we realized was that the protections on the internal operating system and application that the customer thought were there are missing. And so anybody with it as an insider threat could fundamentally compromise that application. And we only found that because the two of us fed off each other and worked together. When I first joined the team that I joined when I became a pen tester, the culture of that team was literally every person for himself. It was silence in the room. All you could hear is keyboards clicking. And if you ask a question, you got the scowl of shame from everybody else in the team. When I became the manager, we fundamentally changed that. We got rid of everybody who had that attitude. And we said, we will all work together. So the reason I hammer on that is you have an obligation to be that person. Share. Share even in spite of the culture not being one of sharing. Because if you can do that, then you will eventually change the culture. And you are only good if you share and work together, because that is when you become an effective, and I see some people nodding, so you guys feel what I'm talking about on this. So let me move on. All right. Let's talk a little bit about education. So we're going to kind of shift, and I'm going to try and pick up the speed on a few of these slides because I want to get through a couple of things. But I wanted to really make sure and dwell on that aptitude and attitude part. And I've seen a lot of people nodding their heads up and down. Is this resonating with you guys? Is this making sense? Is this helpful? Okay, good. I'm glad to hear it. All right, good. Let's talk about certs. This is kind of the ugly truth. I apologize if there's anybody from ISC squared in the room, but certs are a necessary evil. They are not something that will necessarily get you a job. And if you get a certification, it does not mean that you're a good pen tester. It means that you have the certification. What makes you a good pen tester is all the stuff I covered in the other slides, right? Plus your technical skills. That makes you a good pen tester. Unfortunately, the reality is that oftentimes you can't get in the door without some of these certs. And the one that I have seen the most is the CISSP. Now, CISSP is difficult to get, it's difficult to maintain, it's costly. But if you are, I see a lot of folks in the audience that look like your early career trajectory. If you get an opportunity for an organization to pay for your CISSP, jump on it, get it, okay? Because it is a gatekeeper, because oftentimes in HR, now if I have a way to say it when we hire, I will not make CISSP a requirement. Okay, but if you're going to go after a government job or something like that, oftentimes it is. So, but if you get an opportunity to get it, please get it and then keep it. And then consider the something like certified in cybersecurity. If you can't swing it all the way for a CISSP, get something. Show that you can pass some of these tests and get some of these certifications. The one and only benefit, in my mind, of CISSP is you now have a common language. So if me and that guy back there were sitting there talking and I say, what's your network architecture? He says, we follow the Bell LaPadula model. I'm like, got it. Okay, let's move on. I know that, right? That is the only benefit. It's not really going to help that, and plus getting in the door past HR. But I just want to go ahead and mention that, because it is something that if you get an opportunity, go for it. Let's talk about things that I think are more practical. OffSec. The offensive security guys, those people rock. They do a lot of good work. Now, they're the ones that bring you Kali, Exploit DB, Metasploit Unleashed, a lot of other courses. So offensive security guys are really very, very good. They're very smart. They're very focused. They give good technical content, and it's always updated and very useful. So think about the offensive security guys. They're still a little expensive. They have multiple different certifications and multiple different tracks, but just because they say their words OffSec, they are also very defensive oriented. So if you want defense and SOC operations and things like that, consider going to the, looking at OffSec first. The Offensive Security Certified Professional, OSCP, that's the granddaddy of the certification. That's an extremely hard certification. I'll be quite honest, I didn't get it. Partly because I didn't agree with the way that they ran the tests. The tests are not real world. In a real world engagement, you're going to have days to be able to write the report. You're going to be able to think about it and do good work on it. All of this stuff is 24 hours. And I get it. They have to structure it some way. But for me, that's why I was like, yeah, no, this is just not going to resonate with me. But they also have a number of free resources. Again, I'll apologize to anybody in the audience who is or is related to SANS. SANS used to be the only game in town with offensive security and a lot of these other folks. SANS is no longer the only game in town. In my mind, they have priced themselves almost to the point of irrelevance, because I don't know about you kids, but $9 grand for a SANS class, I'm thinking $9 grand for a SANS class or 2 avionics instruments for my airplane. Oh, that's a no-brainer. I know exactly how I'm going to choose. But by the same token, if you're in the federal government and you get a voucher and you get an opportunity, go to a SANS class. Just be aware that oftentimes the material is highly curated, highly scrubbed. It goes through multiple levels of QA, which means you will almost never find a mistake in it. You will find mistakes in OffSec stuff because they turn it around pretty quickly, but you almost never find a mistake in it, but it'll be 3 or 4 years old by the time you take the class, okay? So there's trade-offs, but they do also focus on a lot of the programmatic kinds of things, which I'll talk about here in a minute. There are a lot of other, in fact, at this same time, John Strand is giving a talk over in one of the other tracks. There are a lot of other resources. Black Hills Information Security, if you don't know them, take a picture of this slide and run, don't walk, back to your nearest computer and go look up BHIS. Black Hills Information Security, those guys are sharp. And so they have a lot of resources, including Pay What You Can. And they have a lot of free seminars. And so there's a lot of good things there at Black Hills. InfoSec Institute, I don't know them personally, but that's another option. And many colleges and universities have cybersecurity courses, other formal technical degrees, things like that. bottom line that I'm trying to get to is these are all valuable resources for you, but I will hire the right person regardless of certification and regardless of the education that you have, because I'm going back to what makes a good penetration tester. I fundamentally believe that if you've gotten any education whatsoever, you can learn. But what I can't necessarily believe is, can you work in a team? Do you have the right ethics? Do you have the curiosity? Do you have the drive? Do you have the desire to really go, the passion to make this world a better place? That's what I focus on. Unfortunately, I don't hire people all the time, but if you find a company that takes that attitude and you get an opportunity to work for them, absolutely do. All right, let's talk about some technical skills. As I have said, through vast amounts of research, I have determined beyond a shadow of a doubt that 75.3864% of all pen testing tools are command line. You can take that number to the bank. No, I just made it up. But the truth of the matter is that if you're sitting here looking at technical pen testing skills, please be comfortable at the command line. Now, I am, as you can tell, a little bit older. So I come from the VAX, VMS, old school, SCO, Unix, that kind of a side where you really had to know the command line. Okay, I still don't even kind of really like this whole windowed operating systems. In fact, if you saw when I connected my Mac up, the first thing you saw was terminal window, right? It's like, I have to have it there. Okay, it's my pacifier. It's my security blanket, all right? But seriously, learn the command line. Know at least something about Windows, Linux, and Mac. If you know Linux, you can do Mac. If you know Mac, you can do Linux. They're a little bit different. But know how to drop into PowerShell and do something at the Windows command line, okay? Because you're going to need to do that. Know some basic networking. You don't have to sit there and say the fourth bit in the third byte of the second packet in a TCP. There's resources for that. I don't care. But you have to understand, wait, I'm looking at this ARP address lookup, and I'm getting two different IPs, or I'm getting two different MAC addresses for this same IP. Oh, we got an IP collision, okay? You have to know enough basic networking to understand things like that. Know at least one scripting language, okay? Bash, Python, PowerShell, I don't really care. Pick one. And I would suggest that you know a compiled language, such as C. C is what I cut my teeth on. The Kernighan and Ritchie, that little thin, little narrow book, Kernighan and Ritchie's treatise on the C programming language. I used to carry that book around with me all the time. It's just, love C, okay? Yes, sir?
Just real quick, do you still use basic C?
Yes, in fact, thank you, my good friend, for the tee up on this, okay? This one time, on a pen test 2 weeks ago, literally 2 weeks ago, I was on a pen test and I was sitting there looking at the potential for an exploit, and I'm like, and I dove into exploit DB, and by Jove, there's a C program to exploit this vulnerability. And it wasn't built into Metasploit or anything like that. It's some, person off in the ether webs that wrote this exploit, and I pick up the C language. Now, I've never used this before, so am I going to unleash this on a customer site without looking at it? No. I see heads shaking. Good for you guys. No. We're going to sit down and we're going to read the C code, and we're going to understand what it does. And we look at it, we go ahead and throw it into the compiler, and it pukes garbage all over the screen. Ah, crap. Okay, so let's open it up with the editor and let's go down through it and say, oh, that's because the line wrapped in the middle of the line. Okay, got it. Fix it. Oh, wait, no, that's the old deprecated call. This is what I have to do today. And so in the end, I got the exploit to run and work and deliver the packets, but the target wasn't vulnerable. Fine. But I did all that in about 10 or 15 minutes live right there on the site. So the answer to your question is absolutely fundamentally yes. So, and that was actually my tee up into that example. Let's talk about some other skills. And I'm amazed the number of people that don't know how to do this. How many of you guys have used SSH to just connect to something? Used SSH. Good, awesome. That's a bigger percentage than I expected. How many of you all have used SSH to port forward 3 hops through 3 different computers? Hard, right? A few of us, right? But when you need to do that, can you think of any other way to do it? Negative. That is one of the reasons why SSH, understanding SSH and being able to be very good at it, why we use this in a pen test. Compromise a machine. This one time on a pen test, the organization swore on a stack of science books that their protected enclave and their general purpose enclave shall never touch. Never touch. They hung their whole entire security program on the network isolation, except that one guy that put a box that was dual homed on both systems and then didn't take care of the box and had a web server on it, which I compromised. And then from that compromised web server, because all they would allow was SSH in around internode within the protected enclave, all I had is SSH to move around in that enclave. So boy, did I learn these switches. But what was the point of that? The point of that was, if you're going to assume that an architecture is completely isolated, please believe that it is not. There will always be somebody that will tie two isolated networks together. Okay, back, pen testing, programming frameworks, web and databases, WordPress, IIS, MSQL, whatever kinds of things that you see. If you see it a common technology, you probably want to say, I'm going to spend a little bit of time getting to understand that technology. Know some core tools. You guys have many of you guys have I've already met and talked to you guys about it. We have the Greenhouse Village right around the corner over in the event center. So there you can sit down and you can learn Nmap, Metasploit, Burp Suite, hash, password cracking, and vulnerability scanning. So you can go sit there and look through those. The reason I chose all those tools was malice aforethought. If you know even just 3 of those core tools, you can be effective on a pen test. One of the guys that I hired recently, he came in and he got a couple of these tools under his belt, and we literally sat down a few weeks later and went on a pen test together, and he was effective. So if you know these core tools, you can contribute. Other essential tools, Wireshark, TCP dump. I realize this is kind of coming a little fast, but let's switch gears just a little bit and talk about, what do you want to go after in this sport? Do you want to be a generalist or a specialist? Do you know a little about a lot, or do you know a lot about very little? And I will tell you, there is room in this community for all of you, okay? What I prefer to be is the person that knows a lot or knows a little about a lot of things, but I'm going to take 1 or 2 things that I'm going to make mine. Because if I'm going to be on a pen test and somebody says, hey, I've got this iSCSI, this unauthenticated iSCSI endpoint, I'm like, give me it, And they're like, here, go, please. I can't even spell iSCSI, so you go, right? And so, but and it's just because it's something that just tickled me, and I started working on it and everything like that. And I was actually doing system administration on iSCSI stuff, and that's when I discovered it. And I thought, ooh, this is scary. If you don't authenticate your endpoints, this could be bad, right? So anyway, my point is, decide what you want to be and find out those things that you're going to be passionate about and pursue them. You don't have to be an expert at everything. That's why it's important to work as a team. I swear to you, I am not a very good Active Directory domain enumerator, okay? I would actually rather hand that off to my team member because he's far better at it than I am. So that's okay. Be a specialist if you want to be a specialist, but find out what gets your heart racing and be really good at that. Specialization can be lucrative, but it is very limited. Example, I was looking for Cold Fusion programmers. I was looking for people that can understand Cold Fusion here recently. There are very few of those. They don't come cheap if you're going to, and that's because it's a very rare specialization. But on the other hand, how many organizations are running Cold Fusion? Not all that many. So you just have to make that trade-off and decide for yourself. let's keep talking about building resources. If you're going to decide to specialize or if you're going to decide to be a generalist, how are you going to find some of these resources? Well, we've already talked a little bit about this. There's a lot of free resources. Proving Grounds Play is 50 free labs and 3 hours access a day for offensive security. Proving Grounds Practice, $200 a year. You know, that's actually something really good. You can even buy it by the month. I don't get any cut from any of these, by the way. I'm just letting you know that these are some resources. Hack the Box, Pentester Lab, Try Hack Me. These are all resources. Thank you, Candace. These are all resources that you can use. The other thing is you can build your own lab. So free resources are free and cheap. You can buy old servers. You can get people to donate old servers. You can grab old computers. You can put up Proxmox as a virtualization system, and you can build your own lab. Start with older surplus systems. Start with free open source stuff that you can easily get. And by the way, I'll tell you, if you start using something like Proxmox, you will get good at the Linux command line, just saying. And find vulnerable VMs on something like VulnHub. And then if you want to get into Active Directory, Goat is a good one. I teased this a little bit earlier. A good pen tester knows technical stuff. A truly great pen tester knows the programmatic stuff as well. And I just see a lot of people kind of groan internally like, oh God, NIST 853, kill me now. You know, okay. But what I will tell you, after having been in this business for a while, every single time there's a technical flaw in the network, every single time, it points to something in the cyber program that's broken. Every single time there is a flaw in the cyber program, it manifests itself in the technical network. You have to be able to speak at the C level as to why a particular security control failed in their program when you have compromised that system. You need to be able to make that tie. If you're not there yet, fine. But if I would encourage you that if you have people on your team that are program experts, that they understand the NIST control framework, listen to those people. Don't tune out and start checking Twitter, okay, when they're talking. Listen to those people because it's important. And NIST is not the only one. I work in the government, so NIST is it for me, but there are others. All right, let's talk about that first gig. It's going to take time. If these pen testing jobs are hard to get, I'm not going to lie to you. You may get very discouraged. Some of the people that I've talked to have been trying for years, and then they finally got that one break, and they ran with it. It is going to take time. You may have to sneak up on it in your current job, and I gave a couple of examples. For instance, learn Nmap, and you're a SOC analyst or something like that, or you're a developer, and somebody does an update, or you're a system administrator and you do an update, get permission from the organization, but run Nmap against that target to make sure it didn't surprisingly open up any new ports and services, and validate that the banners and everything are what you expect it to be. You can begin sneaking up on this even though you can't wear the tag of I'm a pen tester. Use Burp Suite to check out an application. Use Metasploit to set up a test service. You can make sure that you have permission and be transparent with management, but you can begin practicing these skills, and these will be helpful for you. If you are in an organization that gets regular audits, serve as a trusted agent. Nothing is more effective in terms of understanding of the spirit of how these things go than be the trusted agent, that person on the inside, and you're watching and participating with the team. Hang out with others in the field. There's this conference called CactusCon. I don't know if you guys have heard about it. And seriously, come to some of the conferences and things. Take stepping stone jobs. Maybe you always want to be a pen tester, but the job that's open is information system security officer. Fine, start. Get started, get going somewhere. Because again, then you're an ISSO, you find out, do we have a red team? Do we have an internal red team? Why don't we test our own stuff? I'd like to advocate we test our own stuff. Oh, by the way, I've got a few core skills. Let's talk about it. All right, job interviews. I need to get moving pretty quickly here. Be honest with your skill level. There is no shame in admitting that the guy I most recently hired, he told me about 8 times, he said, you do understand I've never been on a live network. It's all been lab environment. I'm like, I got it. But you're a solid guy, I trust you, and I can let you loose on the network. That's fine, let's do it, okay? Be honest about your levels. Be ready to answer the hard question, why are you doing this? That, may sound obvious, but when you're sitting there across from the technical interviewer, you need to have an answer, and you needs to be genuine, because one thing about a technical interview is they can know if you're making stuff up. So anyway, I loved, I sat down and I looked at this slide and I was just like, oh, this is hilarious. because you're right. Every organization, you say, what tools do you have? And they rattle off, we've got CrowdStrike and we've got and they've got that one user that goes star on the NFS exports. And I'm like, all home directories are exported to the entire network. Yay. You know, that one user. And it's just like the whole thing comes tumbling down. All right. That was a lot of information to throw at you. I've got a few minutes before Candace kicks me out. Questions. What questions do you have? Yes, sir, back there. Yes. Yes, sir. I see very few organizations that actually use WSL, to be honest with you. So the short answer is, I have never encountered it in an organization such that I've had an opportunity to exploit it. I have used it quite a bit, and I've found it to be close but no cigar. In terms of using it, I find that it's really very cumbersome. I worry about the partitioning between Windows and WSL, because in order to be able to do a lot of those things, which Linux assumes are going to be run at, ring zero or at root level, I'm worried about what is the Windows kernel going to be really doing with that. And so I'm concerned about it. Your hunch is spot on, but I can't really speak to it from a technical perspective. But I think you've already begun worrying about it, right? And so that's a good hunch. Follow that hunch. Yes. Other questions? Yes, sir. Good. Thank you.
So I have a question about, getting your first gig.
Mm-hmm.
I have a friend who got his bachelor's. He ended up with about a half dozen different certifications. Kind of stuck in the help.
Okay.
His experience, I'm pursuing a network engineering.
Okay.
Technical, not quite a science focus. When you look at resumes like that, though, I mean, you see somebody, it's like, well, he's got a degree, he's been to help desk for a couple of years. I mean, I think he should have pursued another avenue, something specialized, that first step.
Again, my attitude about it is going to be about 3 sigma off of what most of corporate America would be, okay? But I actually think the help desk time is beneficial. And I'll tell you the reason why, and that is, remember back to this slide right here? Who knows the bizarre crap that users do better than a help desk person? Right? Am I lying? Right? Okay. So, and I'll tell you the reason why this is really important. And so I understand it's a drag. Encourage him to keep going, okay? And he may have to change jobs after a while to be able to go do that. But it is something that is beneficial experience. I don't see quite a quick connect between that unless he can get some other additional security type of duties, like saying, we've identified that this configuration is constantly broken in our environment. Let me help you get this configuration tightened up, because then I'll get fewer tickets. Something like that. That would be one way that I would encourage him to go. But so often, the success to a penetration test is relying on my knowledge that humans are inherently lazy. And so help desk will be a beneficial thing for him. Your past network engineering, absolutely fine. That's great. Just understand that there are a multiplicity of methodologies whereby one may forcibly remove the epidermis of a domesticated feline. So lots of ways to skin this cat. Go with the way that gives you warm, fuzzy feelings and feels good about it, and that you feel good about it. Yes, in the back, far back, yes. Getting into, yeah, those are two fundamentally different questions, and we probably would, I'd like to delve into it a little more detail. I probably don't have a lot of time now, but hit me up over in the Greenhouse Village and let's talk about it a little more, because it is fascinating. Okay, AI augmented penetration testing, absolutely. You should absolutely, if you have the ability to use AI to be able to learn things, because remember, you're not going to be the expert in everything, right? So absolutely utilize AI to be able, it's basically a far more effective search engine, absolutely. Be extremely careful about what you disclose. If you disclose a public IP of an organization and you're saying this public IP is running WordPress with 5 old WordPress plugins, you have made a mistake. Don't do that, okay? So be extremely careful about what you disclose to AI, but use it effectively and shamelessly. Now, as far as penetration testing AI, I'll be honest with you, I don't have a lot of experience at it, but I think it is really it is just beginning to be an emerging thing, and it's not going to just be about guardrail escape as far as AI. There's probably some better talks in here, so I can't really be much more helpful than that.